All right, good morning. Wow, so thank you for coming today. That's always a big deal. You know, I know getting up and on a Sunday morning, I wrote a blog post. I'm trying to blog more this year, but I wrote a blog post about going to church, and I thought, a few years ago I had the opportunity where I wasn't preaching every Sunday, and I thought, I wonder what it's like to not go to church, because I've gone to church my whole life. You know, I was raised in a pastor's home, and so I stayed home for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks in a row. I didn't go to church, and I loved it. Like, I loved not going to church, and because basically what I did was I'd sleep in, and I'd get up, and I'd watch a little bit of TV, and I'd go putter around the garage, and then I put my pants on, I watched a little more TV, and took a nap, and I did nothing the whole day. And after, a week, 6 days full of business, just go, 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 it was really nice just to have a day to do nothing. And so I appreciate the fact that you got up, and you put your pants on, and you came to church. That's a really big deal. Thank you for just giving time out of your morning. And I always think it's like, I don't think you can go wrong by spending an hour, depending on how long I preach, an hour and a half. I won't go that long. But I don't think you can go wrong by dedicating a chunk every week to God and to trying to figure out life, to try to get better, to hanging out with people who are also on a similar journey. So I just want to say thank you for being here. I personally appreciate it and just want to say a big thank you. And I'm actually really excited about this new teaching series. We're going to go 3 weeks. We're going to talk about marriage. I love to talk about marriage. I actually really like being married. Now, I know that not everybody in this room is married. I know some of you are married and don't want to be. Some of you are married and want to be. And so I know that when we talk about marriage, it's not like in everyone's wheelhouse, but I think there are things that we talk about while talking about marriage that everyone can benefit from. And so I really encourage you just to lean in and listen in on this conversation. So this year, actually, the lovely and talented Mrs. Peterson and I will celebrate 18 years of marriage. And I absolutely love being married. And we talk a lot about this, but we're actually looking forward to the day when we've been together longer than we've been apart. And so when we were married, I was 22 and she was 20. And so we're just about 4 years away from that time where we'll have been together longer than we were apart. And we're actually looking forward to that day. I love her. Best friend. She still takes my breath away. It still makes me look around when we're walking to the store and separated. I see a pretty girl. I turn, it's my wife, and I give God praise that I wasn't lusting after another woman and that my wife looks that good and makes me want to turn my head. I just love being married to her. It's a beautiful thing. Now, there are definitely moments in our marriage where I could probably wish that she was in another room, to say the least. But overall, the experience of marriage is a wonderful thing. But I know that not everyone has that experience, and our hope is that over the next few weeks as we talk about marriage, that we'll introduce some ideas and concepts, and maybe God will begin to work in your heart and in your life and bring you to a place where we can all be on this journey together and appreciate and enjoy marriage. So I'm actually reading this book. You remember the movie Lincoln that came out not too terribly long ago? Steven Spielberg did the movie Lincoln. It was actually based on this book, which is a book by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and she wrote a book called The Team of Rivals, in which she talked about Abraham Lincoln and his war cabinet, and it's an incredible read. It really is an incredible read. I'm reading it right now, and in it she tells the story of Abraham Lincoln, who early on in his life he had fallen in love with a lady and was just smitten with her, just wanted to marry her, and she ended up dying. And so he went into this deep, deep period of grief. And about a year after she had died, one of his friends, a lady named Elizabeth, began to play Dr. Neil Clark Warren, matchmaker, and she said, I have a sister, right? And that usually doesn't go well when somebody says that. But she said, I have a sister. You remember, you've met her. Her name was Mary Owen. And she said, you've met Mary? And he's like, well, sure, yeah, I remember meeting her. And they had met, sometime earlier. And she said, I tell you what, she's single, and you're single. And she said, I would go back to Kentucky and bring her here to Illinois if you would agree to marry her. So half jokingly, Abraham Lincoln said, oh, okay, I'll do that. And so the story picks up like this. Abraham Lincoln agreed because they remembered that she was likable, smart, and a good companion, although somewhat oversized. When this is where it gets really interesting. When the 28-year-old Mary Owens returned to Illinois, however, a disturbing transformation had taken place. She now appeared, he later wrote, a fair match for Falstaff. Now I'm like, who is Falstaff? So I did a little Google research, and this is what I found, that Falstaff actually had been a character in 3 of Shakespeare's plays. You want to see what Falstaff looks like? Basically, Abraham Lincoln looked at this lady and said, holy crap, she looks like Falstaff, right? A terrible transformation indeed. He said she was a fair match for Falstaff with a want of teeth, a weather-beaten appearance, and a size unattainable in less than 35 or 40 years. He's like, this is not a nice-looking lady. This is not, I don't remember any of this. He tried in vain to persuade himself that the mind was much more to be valued than the person. He attempted to imagine that she was handsome, which back in the day meant pretty, right? But for her unfortunate corpulency was actually true. He conjured up ways that he might procrastinate the evil day. He was like, how do I get out of marrying this woman? But the author says, when he had to make good on his promise of marriage, he finally felt honor-bound to keep his word, so he set about proposing to Mary Owen. And this is how he wrote his proposal to her. He sent her a letter, and this is what he said. This thing of living here in Springfield, Illinois, is rather a dull business after all. I'm afraid you wouldn't be satisfied here. There's a great deal of flourishing about in carriages here, which it would be your doom to see without sharing in it. In other words, you'd see all this high life, but you wouldn't be able to have any part of it, unfortunately. You'd have to be poor without the means of hiding your poverty. Do you believe that you could bear that patiently? What I have said, I will most positively abide by. In other words, I will marry you, provided you really want to do it. My opinion is that you had better not do it. You've not been accustomed to hardship, and it may be more severe than you could now imagine. Sincerely yours, Abraham Lincoln. Well, it's no surprise that Mary Owens turned him down. But this is a man that he saw this lady. He's like, oh my gosh, I do not want to live with this woman. I want nothing to do with her. I'm going to discourage her as much as possible from living with me. I don't want to, I gave my word I was going to marry her, but gosh, I don't want to carry through. I don't want to be married to this woman. Now, here's my hope. I hope you're not married to Falstaff. And I hope equally that you're not married to someone who, like Abraham Lincoln, doesn't want to be with you. The unfortunate thing is I believe that there are probably instances in which that's true. There are probably instances in which people find themselves in a marriage in which they're not enjoying it to its fullest. And so my hope is, again, over the next few weeks, we'll talk about some things that will potentially give you resources to get back on track. Now, here's what I've realized about love and marriage, that falling in love is easier than staying in love. Would you agree with that? I mean, it's fairly easy to fall in love, right? And we could have this conversation, do you fall in love or do you not fall in love? But at some point, getting in love, however you get there, getting in love is actually easier than staying in love. That actually takes work. And here's why staying in love it becomes so difficult. Because stuff gets added. Like stuff just gets added into your life. I mean, think about this. Before marriage and in the early days of marriage, when I saw Sherry coming down the hall or across the room, my first thought was, oh man, she's going to make a move. Now when I see Sherry coming, my thought is, oh man, she's going to make me move. Like, fellas, you know what I'm saying, right? I mean, really, when we first fell in love, when we first got married, there wasn't much responsibility. There wasn't much to care for. There wasn't really a lot to do except just love each other. I mean, you'd go to work, but man, you got home as quick as you could because she was there. You went out and you did your thing. You went to work, but you got home as quick as you could because he was there. There wasn't a tremendous amount of obligations outside of love that had potential to consume your time and energy. Just you and her, just you and him. I mean, there were really, at that point early on in the game, for most of us, right, there wasn't really anyone extra to pick up after. There were no doors to close. By the way, do your kids close doors when they come in from the outside, or is it just mine? Do y'all have to yell at your kids to close the doors too? Is it just me? Okay, good. I wonder about this sometimes. But there were just the two of you, and there were no extra clothes to scrub. This is no lie. Last year, we took a trip, a 7-day trip, and we were packing for it. And Sherry ended up, between the two of us, we scrubbed, folded, and packed 60 pairs of underwear. That's a lot of work, right? Now, you may not be packing that many underwear, but the point is, like, with the addition of family, with the addition of responsibility, with the addition of extra jobs, with the addition of all of this other stuff in life, all of a sudden, there's more to do than just focus on and stare dreamily into your lover's eyes. There's more stuff that's added to your relationship. Over time, life picks up stuff. Kids, cars, mortgages, hobbies, to-do lists, jobs, etc. Stuff gets added, which competes for our attention that used to go to just loving and investing and engaging and caring for one another. Now there's competition for that. And then there's this. Stuff changes. I mean, think about this, just honestly. The sounds, the smells, the sights, like the longer you're together, the more unseemly those things become, right? And I'm just finding that over time, stuff changes, and stuff gets added, and it just gets harder to stay in love. So I'm actually finding these days that love is a lot like a lawn. Now, I'm not a guy who cares much or knows much about having a perfect lawn, but I actually live across the street from that guy. His name is Nico. And Nico, this is no joke, Nico has the most immaculate lawn. And this is how incredible Nico is about his lawn. I've literally seen him out there. He'll walk through his lawn like this, and I've watched him get down and do this. And so one day I asked him, like, what are you doing? And his lawn is filled with fescue grass. You know what kind of grass that is? You know what that is? It's a certain kind of grass. And he goes through, and if he sees a blade of Bermuda grass, he'll actually reach down and pull that Bermuda grass out. He literally is down pulling out anything that doesn't look like fescue in his yard. Amazing lawn. The man, he pays incredible attention to his lawn. And so I don't want to be the neighbor whose nasty-looking lawn lowers the average value of houses in our division. So I've actually tried to be more aware of my lawn, and I've asked Nico for some help. And I've learned something. You ready? Here it is. When I pay attention to my lawn, it actually looks better. When I work on my lawn, it actually looks better. I enjoy it more. And I've learned something else, that if I don't pay attention to my lawn, it pretty quickly begins to fill up with other kinds of weeds, with brown spots, with anthills, with all kinds of different grasses. Like that happens when I don't pay attention to my lawn. And all of a sudden I begin to realize that, hey, my lawn and my marriage in a crazy kind of way are almost alike. When I pay attention to my lawn, it stays beautiful and fresh and invigorating, and I can walk through it and not worry about stepping on things that are going to hurt me. The same thing is true in my marriage. When I actually pay attention to my marriage, it's a beautiful thing, and it brings me joy, it brings me refreshment, and I'm not worried about getting hurt as I navigate through the marriage. Now, what I've found is that a lot of times we don't pay attention to my lawn. I have a tendency to look across the street at Nico's lawn and think, man, I wish mine looked like his. I wish my lawn looked like his. And here's the truth. There are a lot of times in marriage we fall in love, it's easy, it's fun, and then stuff gets added and stuff changes, and all of a sudden you realize I've got a lot of work here to do to get my lawn, to get my marriage back in order. And we start looking out across the street and we see the other neighbor's lawn and says, his looks so good, I wish mine looked like that. And sometimes the tendency is to think, maybe I'll just sell my house. Maybe I'll just walk away from my lawn. Maybe I'll just walk away from this and I'll just go get a new lawn. See, I learned this a long time ago. If the grass is greener on the other side of the road, it's probably time to water your own lawn. See, if your lawn is dying, it's not your lawn's fault. If your lawn is dying, it's probably not the best time to go and move into a new house. Maybe it's just time to pay attention to the lawn. Now, you get the metaphor, right? So what I want to do is I want to just lean in, and I want to talk to men and husbands in particular. But ladies, I encourage you to listen in onto this conversation. And I'm going to make a statement here, and I don't expect to spend a lot of time actually explaining this. We've talked about it in the past, and I think the case is made. But the Bible teaches, and we actually believe, that the husband is assigned the role of leader in the home. So if you're a husband, basically you're the point man, and you're charged with building a team and creating a great home. Like you're the coach, you're the guy. Like the results of the family ultimately lie on the shoulders of the husband. Now, in our culture, we respect leaders who build great teams. We respect coaches who win games. We respect CEOs that lead organizations that are socially and morally responsible. We respect bosses who own businesses that are profitable. In other words, we respect leaders who produce results. Is that right? Fair enough? Right? Now, there's a problem, I believe, for a lot of guys, and it's this right here. Respect in your marriage is connected to results in your home. Respect in my marriage is connected to results in your home. You know what I've found to be true? That it's a lot easier for Sherry to respect me when I'm actually producing results, things like love and trustworthiness and completing projects and caring for my children. And when I'm actually producing results, what I've found is that the respect level goes up. But when I'm not producing those results, the respect level goes down. It's kind of like it's hard to continually respect a coach who consistently loses games. It's hard to respect a CEO who consistently has losing years financially. At some point, you look at him and say, I need to see some results. The Bible says, as husbands, we're leaders in the home. Consequently, we are expected to produce results. And when we produce results, that comes with respect. Now, we say this about respect. You can't demand respect. You have to earn it. This is something that every leader has to figure out how to do. How do I earn this respect? Integrity, leadership, understanding, love, courage, wisdom, helpfulness, all these are part of a resume that actually brings in and yields respect. Now, one time Jesus was teaching and he made this point. This verse has kind of grabbed onto my heart and it has arrested my attention. I want to share it with you. He said, you can't enter a strong man's house and rob him without first tying him up. Only then can his house be robbed. You can't enter you can't just walk into a place. If there's a strong man, if there's a man in the house, if there's a strong man in the house, you aren't going to walk in and just start taking stuff. What's he going to do? He's going to fight you. He's going to come up against you. He's going to say, you can't do that in my house. You can't. But if you can somehow incapacitate the strong man, if you can somehow put him out of the picture, then you can basically wreak havoc, is what Jesus was saying. And what I believe is that a home, a marriage, will be safe or vulnerable, depending on the presence of a strong man. A man who takes his leadership responsibility seriously. A man who understands it's my job to create a culture. It's my responsibility to create a culture which my wife is honored and cared for and loved, and my children are safe and loved and cared for and honored as well. Let me just shoot really straight with you, fellas. My concern is that a lot of men are tied up with stuff. Things like work, pornography, hobbies, things like spiritual anemia, just distracted by life, finances, whatever the case, they're tied up, and as a consequence, the home is being robbed. And the results, they're just not there. And consequently, I believe there's a lack of respect, and I've observed this. Usually if there's chaos, there's no plan. Isn't that right? You ever walk into a room and everybody's just kind of buzzing. There's a lot of movement, but there's really nothing happening. I mean, everybody's moving around, but there's no progress being made. And at some point, you want to say, "What are we doing here? We need a plan." You ever have that? Ever had that experience? We need a plan. What are we doing? I found that usually, if there's a lot of chaos, there's no plan. And if there's no plan, it's usually because there's no leader. Right? No plan, usually a result of no leader. And what I'm finding a lot of these days is that the leader is tied up with other things. And the result is chaos in the home. Now you know this, that staying in love requires a sustained effort. Falling in love is easy. Staying in love requires a sustained effort, which I believe requires a plan. Requires a plan. I mean, this is basically what I want to put out on the table today, and I hope you'll remember this idea. Love needs a plan. Falling in love, good for you. Staying in love, you're going to need a plan. You're going to need a way to stay in love because it doesn't happen accidentally. And so a while ago, I was reading in Proverbs, And I found some great advice from a dad, Solomon. He was talking to his son, and he gave him some great advice that I think sets us free, and I wanted to share it with you today. This is what he said to his son. He said, my son or my child, don't lose sight of good planning and insight. Hang on to them, for they fill you with life and bring you honor and, say it, respect. Good planning, good insight. Hang on to them. They're gonna fill you with life, and they'll bring you honor and respect. And then listen to what he said. He said, they keep you safe on your way and keep your feet from stumbling. And look at this. You can lie down without fear and enjoy pleasant dreams. If you have a plan and you embrace insight. So I'm just going to take a leap here and suggest that a lot of marriages are in trouble. A lot of marriages are living without love because there is no plan to nurture love. We fell in love. It was easy. It was good. I mean, it used to be amazing. It used to be, but there wasn't a plan in place to sustain and nurture love. And as a result, your lawn now looks like crap. It's got ant hills, and it's got all kinds of different weeds, and it's got bare spots because there wasn't a plan to keep it green. There wasn't a plan to keep it fresh. So, fellas, I would just say to us, to me, I mean, I'm doing the talking here today, but I've already talked this to myself about 4 or 5 times. I would simply say to all of us that if we want respect from our wives and love in our homes, that we embrace this wisdom from Solomon. Look what he said. Don't lose sight of good planning and insight. Hang on to them. They fill you with life and bring you honor and respect. Hang on to the idea of planning. Hang on to the idea of insight. So let me do this. Let me just bring all this together and just give you 3 basic, really simple ideas for putting together a plan that will actually nurture and sustain love in your homes. And then I want to end up today by sharing a really cool story with you. You ready? Here's how I put this together. If you're interested in actually creating an environment in which there's respect and love, the first thing, and gentlemen, this is our responsibility to do this. The first thing that we have to do is pay attention. Just pay attention. Now, here's what I've realized, and some of you have been married longer than I have. Some of you are older than I am, so you realize this. That a lady is not a simple phenomenon. Can I get a witness? She is like a lawn. She's always evolving and requires constant nurture and care. Because if you don't, there will be an anthill that pops up, right? And there will be Bermuda grass. Never crabgrass, just Bermuda grass, right? She needs to be constantly nurtured and constantly loved and cared for. And gentlemen, this is our responsibility. In fact, the Bible says to us that we are to love our wives like we love ourselves. Let me tell you something, fellas. When I'm hungry, you know what I do? The same thing you do. I go get something to eat, right? If I'm thirsty, you know what I do? The same thing you do. I go get something to drink. I pay attention to myself. I don't let myself go without much. The Bible says we're, as men, as husbands, we are to care for our wives in the very same way. We pay attention to her just like we pay attention to ourselves. You know what that means? That means when we see that she has a need, we nurture it. We care for her. We love her. And we take the initiative to make all of this happen. See, if you're not paying attention, here's what's going to happen. You're going to wake up one day and realize, I've got a mess on my hands. I'm living with a lady that I don't know what she's like. And it's largely a result of not paying attention, not nurturing, not consistently being aware of. Essentially, the Bible would say to us as men, as husbands, it would say, care for your girl. St. Peter wrote it like this. This is what he said. He said in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 6, he said, you husbands must give honor to your wives. You treat her with understanding as you live together. She may be weaker than you are, but she's your equal partner in God's gift of new life. Now, this is huge. Live with her with understanding. Now I don't know if Peter was married or not, but that's a big deal right there, isn't it? To live with your wife in an understanding way because she's changing just like you are. She's evolving just like you are. And our job as husbands is to take the initiative to nurture and to care and be aware of and pay attention to. If you want to create an environment in which you're respected and there's love in the home, you will take this initiative to invest in her, to listen, to pay attention. Now, here's the kicker. Peter said, if you don't do this, listen to this, look at this. If you don't treat her as you should, your prayers will not be heard. If you don't treat your wife like you should, don't waste your time talking to God. Now, I think I've told you this before, but I used to didn't understand. This was not a concept with which I was familiar. I didn't understand this completely until I had daughters. And now I understand it differently. If a young man comes into my house and mistreats my daughter, I want nothing to do with him. I will cut him off as soon as I possibly can. Son, don't talk to me. You've mistreated my daughter. Now I understand this verse. Essentially, God looks at every lady and says, this is my girl. And son, if you want to talk to me, you treat her well first. And I would just go as far to say, and gentlemen, I put myself right here with you. It's not me talking to you. It's kind of, I wish I were sitting out there and someone else were saying this, because I work through this too. But if we are not careful and if we're not paying attention to and nurturing and loving our wives, we will put a lid on our spiritual development. God will not answer the prayers of a man who is mean to his wife. God will not hear the prayers of a man who ignores and does not nurture and care for and love his wife. This is not my idea. I have to live under these rules too. This is God's idea. He said, you care for your wife, you live with her in an understanding way, you pay attention to her, and if you do, you're going to have an incredible home. But if you don't, I'm not going to have anything to say to you, and I really don't want to hear anything from you either. Pay attention would be the first word. See, a good coach pays attention to his team, and a good husband pays attention to his wife. And as you pay attention to your wife, you will begin to notice certain themes. You will begin to notice certain patterns, certain trends. And based on what you see as you pay attention, the second thing I would encourage you to do is to make a plan. How am I going to continue to nurture and develop and sustain love in my family? How am I going to do that? Now, I do not have a good sense of what it takes to create a great lawn. I don't know. I never have liked lawn care. I don't care. You know, if it were my way, I went to Las Vegas once, and the most beautiful thing out there that I saw was that there were literally people. Have you guys, anybody been to Vegas? They literally, people, they don't have grass out there because it's the desert. So they put rocks beside their sidewalk. That's their lawn. And some people actually go as far as put like AstroTurf down. That's amazing to me. That you could have a lawn that's AstroTurf. You would never have to mow it. You would never have to weed it. That's beautiful. So in my world, that's perfect. But I live in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where we have grass. So I don't have an idea how to go about making a good lawn, but Nico does. So I said, Nico, I need help. Like, I live across the street from you, and I don't want you to look out your window and see my lawn and hate me. I don't want to be that guy in the neighborhood, right? So help me. And so Nico shared a secret with me. This is what it is right here. Nico goes to Scott's Lawn Care. So I went in there, and I don't know if you can see this, but this is Nico's lawn. He's like a 7, and this is like my lawn. I'm like a 2, right? But we're working. We're working it up. And the reason that I'm moving from a 2 to a 3 to a 4 is because there's a plan here. So there's actually a plan to make my lawn better. And it occurred to me, like, if I can have a plan for my lawn, I could probably have a plan for my marriage. So, began to put some work into it and found that it actually does work when you have a plan. You can build and sustain love. And I would just say this, gentlemen, if you want your marriage to work, it really is your responsibility. God has charged you with leadership. You're the coach. It's your responsibility to take the lead on this. Do not sit back and wait for your wife to do this. It's your responsibility before God to make this thing work. And you know what I found is that when you take the lead, your wife will rise up and be your biggest cheerleader and be your biggest helper. Am I right, ladies? Now, I found, thank you. I found, well, tell me what you think about that. I found that most conversations in marriage, especially for people who have kids, tend to revolve around 3 things. One is reactive parenting. Like, our kids in trouble? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Or, oh my gosh, we got to sign them up for soccer. What do we got to do? Or, we need clothes. It's time to go get them clothes for school. Just always reactive parenting consumes a lot of time in married conversations, especially those people who have kids. Crisis management tends to be a big area of discussion. It's time to get the tires changed, or the garage door broke. We got to fix this, or we've got to finish painting that room, or we've got the in-laws are coming in this weekend. We got to get all this cleaned up. Like, always something, always a flurry, always a crisis to be handled. Takes up a lot of time in conversations. And then finally, in some marriages, business, the calendaring, the paying of bills, the paying attention to finances takes up the rest of conversation. So what I find is that most conversations in marriage revolve around solving problems. And that basically consists of the communication in most marriages. I would just encourage you, as you begin to build a plan to sustain and nurture love, to build a plan that includes at least 3 more components. Look at this. Pray, play, and business. Let me just talk a little bit about each one. Guys, I would just encourage you to every single day pray with your wife. It doesn't matter if you can't pray. Remember this prayer, God is great, God is good, let him thank us for his food. Let us thank him for our food. By his hands we're all fed, give us our daily. Remember that? Like, if you prayed that, you can pray. Like, listen, this is how we do it at our house. Every night in bed, before we go to bed, we lay there and I hug Sherry and I'll just pray and I just thank God for her and we'll pray about, a situation. It's literally like a minute or two, depending on how tired we are. Sometimes it's 30 seconds. God, thanks for the day. Right? So, but there's something beautiful about a man who prays with his wife. There's something beautiful about a man who'll take spiritual leadership in his home. And guys, you may not be a spiritual giant, but you don't need to be. All you need to do is to be willing to put a foot out and say, God, I'm going to take this on. I'm just going to pray with my wife every day. Right? You would be amazed what happens if you'll just take just a little bit of time to just pray with your wife. It basically means to your wife, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to make the connection with God for our family. I guarantee you, if you will take that initiative, fellas, it will be a game changer in your marriage. If for no other reason, then this one fact. It's really hard to talk to God and express gratitude for your wife if you've been a jerk that day. Right? I mean, I know. It's such a big deal to hold your wife and to pray for her, just to pray with her. I encourage you to make that a part of the plan that sustains and nurtures love in your home. And then I would just encourage you to play together. Listen, here's what I find is that most couples get so busy, there's no time to play. And most of our conversations are on a very serious business note, or they end up in crisis management, or they end up in we're just frustrated and tense, and there's very little time to actually play and laugh. And by the way, if you have kids, it can happen with your kids, but it definitely needs to happen without your kids as well. Playing together. Laughing together. Guess what? You fell in love, and what some of the first things that you did when you first started falling in love was you played together. You laughed together. You talked. You giggled. I promise you, if you're going to sustain and nurture that kind of love, you're going to have to do the very things that brought you to that point in the first place. And guys, this is your responsibility to take the initiative, to make this happen, to schedule some kind of a date, to schedule some kind of a time regularly to play together. And then finally, obviously, business. You need to do your family business together. Income. You are like a business, you understand. You have income, expenses, personnel, systems, etc. Manage it together. This is part of the plan for sustaining love. Pay attention to your wife. Make a plan with your wife. And finally, do this. Work the plan. Like, do what you have written down. You sit down with your spouse or sit down with your spouse-to-be and you put a plan together that includes time to pray together, time to play together, time to do business together. And then you work the plan. And you know what? When you work the plan, something happens. Something begins to happen in your home. The dynamic of your home actually begins to change. And this is what Solomon said to his son. He said, pay attention to this. Pay attention to insight. Live with your wife in an understanding way. Pay attention to planning. And he said, this is what happens. Look. Because they will fill you with life and bring you honor and respect when you do these things. Honor and respect. And then he said this. They keep you safe on your way. They keep your feet from stumbling. In other words, you're going to create something that you're not always tripping over and falling over. You're going to create a marriage. You're going to create an environment in which there's no fear. Look how he wrapped it up. He said, you can lie down without fear and enjoy pleasant dreams. Without the fear of your marriage falling apart, without the unpleasant dream, this horrible nightmare of actually living in a marriage that has no love and no respect. See, I believe it's actually possible to live in love for many, many years with one person. I mean, the Bible teaches us that this is God's plan for us. And experience shows us that even though it happens less today than it used to, it can still happen. Like, we can still live in love with one person for a really, really, really long time. Now, what I would say is that some of you might actually be living with a nasty lawn right now and a chaotic marriage. You might feel like you're drowning. But here's a thought. Look at this. You don't drown by falling in the water. You drown by staying there. Yeah? I mean, the good news is that you may have chaos and your lawn may look dysfunctional and your marriage may be a wreck, but it doesn't have to stay that way. See, God has some great ideas for marriage. God has some great resources for marriage. And there's always hope for the person who will say, I'm ready and I want to do this differently. Now, I believe you can build something that is good and will last a long time if you'll pay attention, if you make a plan and you work the plan. And so recently I sat down with one of my favorite couples. They've lived in love for a really long time. And I wanted to share that conversation with you today. So please watch this up here. I'm here with a couple of my favorite people, Bud and Barb Hickenbotham. In fact, to my family, we call them Papa Bud and Granny Barb. And just two amazing people that my family has personally grown to love, and their marriage story. Over the years, we got to know them, and I felt like as we do this series on marriage that you need to hear their story. So they've agreed to sit down with me and you and share their story. So let's just get into it, guys. Papa Bud, how many years have you been married?
How many years have you been married? 55. 55.
50. Have you been married that long as well?
I've been married to him that long.
Okay.
Remember, he's a jokester.
He is a jokester. Yes, he is. So how many kids do you guys have?
We have 5 children, 10 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
And when we were all together, like at Christmas, my daughter said, look what love started.
Wow. My recollection is early on in your marriage when your kids were still young, Papa Bud, you were injured, weren't you, pretty significantly in a mining incident? Is that right?
Right. I was 40 years old, and a rock fell on me. And I never did go back to coal mines after that.
My dream of marriage was to get married and to raise children and be their mother and cook for them and sew for them and keep a clean house and have them all cleaned up when their daddy came in from work. Well, the accident brought about a change in our life.
When we look at some people who've been married for 55 years or a good period of time, we wonder, what kind of difficulties have they had to face. So when you tell me that early on in your career as a father, as a young father, you were injured, and at that point, being a stay-at-home dad was probably close to being unheard of, I would imagine. And yet you picked up that role. So it hasn't been 55 years of just everything easy and everything perfect. Obviously, there's been some difficult times. Papa Bud, you have more lines than a zebra wearing corduroys.
Well, that goes along with being happy.
Right.
You take a funny joke.
Right.
Will take a frown off of anybody's face. And I've always tried to be happy, Love Jesus and be happy, that's what I say.
And tell me, how have you managed to stay in love with one woman through difficult times for 55 years?
Well, a man that is a man, when he has the best, he recognizes that and cherishes it and takes care of it and thanks God every morning for his wife. A wife is a precious thing as far as I'm concerned. I would rather die than to cheat on her or hurt her in any way. I would rather die. That's the way I felt about her. I've always felt that way ever since I met her.
So you've been married for 55 years. You've stayed through it, through some difficult times, some good times, some really good times, some tough times. I mean, you've done it, and it's amazing. What would you say to a man who might be sitting in our church today, who in his mind is thinking, I can't do that. I can't stay married to this woman?
I would say to him, well, first I'd say, do you love her? And if he said yes, I would say, well, take it to the Lord and work it out between you two. Because love is a precious thing. Jesus Christ gave his soul because he loved the people. Now, a little old mistake maybe, or a big mistake. Love it could conquer all, love can. If you love a woman, I say, talk it out and forgive her, no matter what she's done.
Granny Barb,
Yes.
similar question. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the early days, the accident, and that was a game changer for you.
Yes.
And so things weren't always easy, but you made it. So like, what's some advice you'd give to a couple that's going through some difficult times in their life?
I think all marriages begin with the romantic love. But the romantic love has to turn into a serious love that can solve problems together, that can raise children together, and work out the difficulties. It's been a pleasure to be married to someone I'm in love with and still in love with. And I think if you're ever in love, it should last you, but you have to work on it to make it last you a lifetime.
What do you do to work on it?
A sense of humor, being able to forgive and forget and move forward. Each day is a new beginning, and I get up every day thinking that's my new beginning.
What would you say, Papa Bud? What is the thing that has made your marriage work for 55 years?
She's a wonderful cook, and she tries to fatten me up, but it doesn't work. But every meal I think I've ever ate, I top it off. Darling, that was a delicious meal, but now I need my dessert, and I get me a little kiss. You know, just the little things like that. Work your problems out.
Right. Yeah.
But a problem cannot be worked out in marriage unless the Lord's in it.
Right.
You got to depend on Him to help you.
So, Papa Bud, what is your secret to a happy and lasting marriage?
She's always liked to travel and take trips. We took cruises. And for instance, our 40th anniversary, I took her to Japan. And on her 50th anniversary, I went back and got her.
What is the thing that has made your marriage work?
It's in most marriages, and they two shall become one.
Right.
And I don't know if people know what that means, becoming one. We often complete each other's sentences. We often say the same thing at the same time. That comes with time and age.
Right.
But it's wonderful to grow old with the man you love.
I love it. Well, Sharon and I talk a lot that you guys have a family much like what we want when our kids are grown and we're your age. Like, we want our kids and our family to function much like yours. So I appreciate very much you guys taking this time and sharing your story, and I'm confident it'll be a help to others. So I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good.
You're welcome.
Next week, we're going to have a couple talk with us. They're going to share their story. It's a story of a marriage that survived multiple affairs, and yet the grace of God has somehow brought them together and reconciled them together. And so I just want you to know that no matter where you are in your marriage, our God is a good God who forgives and empowers and breathes love and life into those who are willing. And I just want to say to you that it is absolutely possible for one man to live with one woman for a really long time and love her, and for her to love him. And so what I want to do today is we're just going to wrap up. I'm going to pray, and the band is going to come, and we're going to sing a song that celebrates Jesus as the one who will break the chains and set us free from the addictions, set us free from the things that tie us down, and set us free as men, set us free as women to love and to care for one another until death do us part. Father, thank you so much for men and women who have lived a long time in love. They've made it through some really difficult times. There have been times, Lord, in which there was no money. There have been fights. There have been ups. There have been downs. But today, 55 years after the fact, they are in love. And it can be done. And I believe the Scriptures lay out a good plan for us. If we'll embrace planning and we'll embrace insight, we can create an environment in which there's honor and respect and love. An environment, Lord, in which people want to be a part of. God, I pray that you will help us as men to take the initiative to create homes that will honor our wives, that will lift them up, that will respect our wives, that will create a place, Lord, where our children are in the home place and they look at us and say, when I'm older, I want to have a marriage like mom and dad's. God, give us your strength and your grace. Forgive us of our sins. Empower us to live with strength. Break us free from the things that tie us down. So again, we can raise up and be strong In the name of Jesus, amen.